Hey, welcome everyone. You know what's really great is I know I'm one of the last speakers today, and you all are still here. So thank you very much for sticking around for this presentation. As mentioned, I'm commanding officer down at Naval Ordnance Test Unit in Port Canaveral, or Cape Canaveral. Space Force Station, if you know, we have a Space Force now, you know, a couple of 3 years ago now, and Patrick, and Cape Canaveral, somewhere out in Colorado, Vandenberg, out in California, I think. Those are all now Space Force stations, so that's pretty neat. All right, let's see here. Clicker. See if that works. There we go. All right, so this is our mission. So Mel did a great job talking about SSP and the enterprise and all the things we're doing. So I am the testing arm, the flight test, integrated ground test arm for SSP. So what do? We take missiles and we shoot them. That's what we do. Whether it's off the pad or out of a submarine, and we do those tests. Now it's just the missile part, no warheads, none of that stuff. We do put test reentry bodies on there, so we know those parts of the systems work, but that is what we do at NOTU. Now, there's also ground tests. So all those missiles that we shoot, we also have what we call active inert missiles. And so electronically, it's a missile, but there's no ordnance in it, no motor, propellant, or any of the other ordnance that you use in a missile. And we do ground testing, so we can do guidance testing, we can do testing if there's a problem out in the fleet. Submarine says, hey, I have this problem, we know this is an issue with the strategic weapon system. They send a message off to SSP headquarters, and then they farm it out to our folks and the contractors that support this program, and they'll use our systems down in NOTU to try to replicate that fault, and then figure out what was wrong, and then come up with a fix, and then turn that fix back around to the fleet so the fleet can then implement that fix and not have that problem out there. So that's kind of mission number one, those kinds of things. There's some other stuff I might talk about. But generically, when you think about the missile system, that's the kind of support we do today. So the sustainment of the current system. But as we get ready to do the D5 Life Extension 2, which Mel, you'll hear me say D5 LE2 a lot, that's what that refers to. So it's this new missile that we're developing. That's the future at NOTU. That's part of that number one mission as well too. The second thing is that on behalf of Commander Navy Installations Command, we operate the Navy port at Port Canaveral. So we've got 2 wharfs down there, about 5 spaces from a warship loading perspective that we can fill up with ships we support, submarines, surface ships, as well as our support ships, so Military Sea Lift Command, NOAA ships, Naval Oceanographic Office ships, so various ships that are out there that support the Navy will come. Occasionally we get the Coast Guard that swings by as well too. And then and we actually also support NASA as well. So in some of the missions that NASA does, they have to offload things at a port. So like, let's say capsules that come back from International Space Station replenishment. Those will get recovered by SpaceX, and because that's a government-sponsored mission, they'll come down here, we'll offload the capsule at the port as well too. So those are kind of the port type things that happen. There's some other training events and things of that nature, but those are new. So I think Mel's diagram with this is way better. Mel, I want to get yours when we're done here. But here's our enterprise across the U.S., and you can see where NOTU is in the grand scheme of things down there in Cape Canaveral from that perspective. This is a little bit about us. So I got about 1,300 people. I talk about military, civilian, government civilians, and contractors, with the majority of those being government contractors. And so if you've heard of them, they're probably down there. Lockheed Martin's, Northrop Grumman's, L3 Harris, Boeing, they're all GD, let's see, General Dynamics. They're about all of them down there. So we have a little bit of different contracts with different contractors to support us. As far as the footprint, from the NAVFAC side, we have 239 structures. So that includes like flagpoles and anything that has like a record climber is a structure. But really, for the rest of us, it's about 66 buildings, right? Whether they're admin buildings, production, operations, magazines, those kinds of things. That's essentially what we have. It's about 126 acres or so. All right, and so as I look to the future into how we as this community here sitting in the room going to work together, it's this road to D5LE2 and X flight. So X flights are the first flights of that D5LE2. So X1 is the first flight, X2, and there's 9 X flights planned, potentially 10. There's some talk about maybe adding a 10th one in there. But there's at least 9 X flights planned from about 2033 through 2036 right now. Okay, and the thought there is well, we got to build those missiles. We're going to build them at NOTU, at the Cape, right? And so that first billet is D5LE2 missile development and launch pad upgrade. And so in order to build the missile, I need to have the facilities. And I have another slide where I'll talk a little bit about that. But Mel talked about the sustainment that we're doing with the D5. We mentioned in our first mission sustainment function as well too. Well, all those facilities that for D5LE2, some of the facilities that we used to use for D5 production for test flights, and the last time we actually did pad launch test flights was in the early 90s, when the D5 missile actually came out, late 80s and early 90s was the last launch. A lot of those facilities, like the launch pad and some of the buildings we call missile assembly and checkout area buildings, or MACA buildings, there's about 6 or so buildings back there that do this work. Those have all been repurposed. And so we have other missions now since the 90s, that's what, 30 years ago. And we're just not going to let buildings sit around and be empty. So we put other things in those. And so in order to support D5LE2 development, we said, hey, what do we need to do? Well, we need to build this engineering test facility, so that's bullet number 3 here, which is a MILCON that's in design right now. In fact, there's probably some people in this room that are working that design for MILCON, P103. About 130,000 square foot lab and production facility, and that facility will do some of this integrated ground tests that I talked about for this new missile. So we're going to build some aims for the D5LE2 missile and put it in this facility so we can do tests and development. And then out in the MACA area is where they're going to be building those. So in MACA building AQ, and AQ doesn't mean anything, it's just a letter designation, is where we're going to build that missile. So today we do other things in there, re-entry body work and some equipment section work, which I know doesn't mean a whole lot to you right now, but there's other work that goes on there, and then it has to get moved. And so as I get to the bottom bullet here, which is X-flight recapitalization, and I'll talk about the other two, I'm kind of a lot of order here, but is X-flight recapitalization. I got a bunch of buildings that I need to upgrade so I can move functions around. And so as I pull a function out of one building, or renovate a building, I pull a function out of there, put it in this building, then I gotta go renovate this building. And then I pull a function out of that building and stick it in this one that you just finished renovating, and then do some more of that, right? So there's a lot of this kind of domino effect that we're looking at for renovations. Because I don't have a lot of extra buildings, but I have some that I can move some stuff, some swing space and things. And so that's where we talk about X-flight recapitalization. I'll go a little bit more into this in some future slides. Mel talked a little bit about Columbian Dreadnought development already, and there are some unique requirements that we'll have to upgrade in our peers for that. You can see some things on their fenders, firewall pumps, stuff like that to support this new warship that we're going to be bringing online. And the plan for that ship is to be delivered in 28, if I remember correctly, thereabouts. And so, that's stuff that we need to be in place for that. And then as part of this D5LE2 work, I need to get missile motors. So Mel talked about missile motor magazines over at the Swift. We actually make the motors out in Utah, and then they get shipped, to wherever facility they need to go to, whether it's with PAC or Swift Land. And they do some work there at those facilities. For us, at least a little bit of Swift Land, they'll do some checks on the motors, put them on another rail car and send them down to us, and we'll offload it down here. We don't have a place to offload it right now. So the last railhead facility is no longer in operation, and so we need to essentially build a new railhead, and that's out in 27 timeframe, P110. And so we'll take those motors, take it off the rail car, and put them on what's called a kneel-down transporter. If you guys know what that is, it's a flat truck with a whole bunch of wheels on it. I think there's like 32 wheels on it, and really low to the ground, and it moves it around. If you've ever seen like how the space shuttle used to get moved around on one of those kind of things, similar but a lot smaller. Same kind of idea though. So, all right. So these are our future needs and capabilities, right? So as we looked at this missile development, D5 missile development, there's facilities, there's a couple of milcons, and this recapitalization. So here's the engineering test facility and some highlights, right? So I mentioned this is where we're going to be doing integrated development, prototyping, a little bit about the site. This is this little footprint here is essentially where we're designing it, and the design is happening right now. There's some cranes in there, lab space, and other things. And so that facility plops down right in the middle of a bunch of other facilities. The facilities to the left we currently use for some storage and other production work. The facility, which you don't really see on the right because it's covered up by the box, is where our strategic weapon system shore is. That's another facility where we do testing and development for the new systems that are coming out. Here's a little kind of thoughts on what that building might look like, with some admin spaces in the top left, and then various lab spaces as you kind of work your way down the building in there. But anyway, just kind of thoughts on that. And then the Cape railhead, I talked about this a little bit already with using the rail to bring the motors down from Swift Land. They'd be offloaded from the boxcar into this kneel-down transporter. And then there's a route that we would use. We're still trying to figure out exactly where we're going to put that. This railhead will actually be on NASA land over Kennedy Space Center, because that's where the rail goes right now. And so we're working with NASA right now to finalize site location. And then this is kind of like how I would have to drive down to our facility down at the MACA where I was telling you about. All right, and then recapitalization. So there are 19 facilities that we're looking at, and we've started putting together the plan and a little bit of the planning for this. We estimate there's 130, separate different upgrade projects. We kind of get a feel for what that would look like. We also, in the previous slide, I showed you that haul route on the red there to drive down essentially from the new rail location all the way down. Along there's some haul route road repairs. Not a whole lot, but there are some places we need to. And then some basic stuff like parking. Some of the areas where we're going to do some of this work, we're going to want to have some security in place, so fencing and guard shack, stuff like that. Things that we really haven't needed from a requirement standpoint for many years, so we let maybe degrade a little bit. We're going to need to update those as well too. All right, this is a little bit of the footprint at the Cape and NOTU where we're at. So little shaded box kind of in the middle there, green shaded is where the ATF would go. And then and this shows kind of the other areas. And so the missile assembly and checkout area, you can see down at the bottom, that's the MACA. There's several buildings in there we'll be looking at. Out at the Trident Wharf, there's some missile load magazines that we're going to be doing some work on, as well as then several others. So the TOF, which is the test ops facility, and there's the data acquisition reduction center in the dark, guidance test building. These are all facilities that we use to do, again, that integrated ground testing that I talked about, as well as data analysis. So when we do flight tests, that data comes back and gets analyzed. These facilities will help support that. And again, these facilities really haven't been updated in a long time. Kind of not quite in the same situation as Swiftland, where everything was kind of built at the same time, and so everything's kind of degraded at the same rate. We're more of a, hey, there's this new mission coming on, and we gotta get everything updated to support that new mission here at NOTU. All right, and so I talked a little bit about recapitalization, NOCOM, and so this map kind of tries to depict the how things are going to work. So you can see down at the bottom left, you have the railhead, right? So you're going to have the missile motors coming into the railhead. Those motors are going to either go to the magazine or they'll go directly to MECA AQ, which you can see is the building kind of in the bottom right. After the missile gets built up and assembled, it'll move over to MECA AH, which is where we'll do the testing on it. So you put it together, and then you got to test it and make sure it works. So there'll be a bunch of lab space. All the floors in these facilities here have to be able to support air pallets. If you guys are familiar, you know what those are. So they can move the missiles and motors around. And then once it gets tested, then we'll move that back around to out to the complex where we have launch complex 46, where we have an erector, so we can take the missile from a horizontal position to a vertical position, and then move it out to the launch complex, and then we'll actually launch it out there. So there's a lot of other buildings I didn't mention in there. Well, Guidance Test Building, which is GTB, the ETF, as well as Strategic Weapons System Shore. These facilities will all be connected via fiber out to the launch complex and interconnected to each other. And the goal is, in Strategic Weapons System Shore, that currently today have the current version of the Columbia-class strategic weapons system there. And ultimately, the goal will be, probably not the first couple missiles, but by the time we get to 7, 8, or 9, will be to pull the trigger in the actual strategic weapons system for a Columbia-class submarine in Strategic Weapons System Shore, and have that system work essentially from the beginning to the end, right? Launch off the launch pad. Now, it's not coming out of a submarine, but it's about as good as you can get from a land-based test. We actually are using the production representative weapon system to launch it. So ultimately, that's where we're trying to get to in the end. All right, and so Mel talked a bunch about sea-based strategic deterrence and some of these other things here, like strategic deterrence is number one priority, DoD, Columbia class being the number one acquisition, nuclear deterrent, top 10 management item, and is strategic deterrent is essentially key to all of our work plans as that whole, right? And so as NOTU being the testing arm, whether it's sustaining Ohio, Columbia development and introduction, as well as V5LE2 development, we're here out to 2084. And so they say, well, what is 2084? What does that mean? Why is that the number, right? So if we talk about the Columbia, when we think about when that last Columbia, there's 12 boats that we're going to build, and that last boat does its last patrol, right? And then there'll be another class of SSBN, hopefully by that time, right, that's coming out, that'll be that. But the Columbia, the things we're building today, will finish their patrols out in 2084. That's when the last Columbia should complete its last strategic deterrence patrol, is 2084. And so NOTU, again, as that testing arm, will do that. And I want to highlight one of the things from a testing perspective, just so you get the perspective. Mel mentioned the importance of this and how important it is. So every year, NOTU, with the fleet, we launch at least 4 missiles off our SSBNs. Every year, we launch 4 missiles to prove to, our folks here at home, whether it's congressional, presidential, decision makers, strategic command, right, that our systems work, right, to the American people, that you are protected by our strategic deterrent blanket. And third, to our adversaries to say, oh, hey, look at this We test this system every year. We launch 4 missiles every year. And we are at 191 successful launches of the D5 missile system, the Trident II D5 missile. And there isn't another missile system that has the record that we have out there. So we think about what we do and the importance of what we do. We got to do it right, and we need your help in being ready to build that next D5 LE2 missile. And so that's, from my perspective, I go back to this, a lot of interconnected parts here. We kind of mentioned the daisy chain. That, to me, is our biggest concern, is understanding and being able to manage successful on-time completion of projects so that when we move from one to the next, we're not delaying further on down the line. All right, that wraps up my official comments here for today. I'll turn it back over to you, Bob. Thanks.